It is my pleasure to introduce to some and to present to others our keynote speaker who walks in that way. Mary Ferrell is the founder and executive director of the Maslow Project. Born and raised in Medford, Oregon, Mary graduated from Southern Oregon University and began working with homeless children and families through the Medford School District. After several years of street outreach and case management, Mary founded the Maslow Project as a youth-centric, one-stop resource center where kids could access basic needs and supported services all in one location. Maslow Project has received national recognition for its program modeling serving homeless youth and has been featured internationally in media outlets such as New York Times, BBC, 2020, and even MTV. Mary continues to serve the community on various task forces and is a member of the American Leadership Forum of Oregon. Let me once again introduce to you someone, again, who is walking the walk, Mary Ferrell.
Today are hard act to follow, so they're amazing. Yeah. So I have to admit it's a little intimidating to be asked to keynote this event. One, because I'm not really a professional speaker, but two, because anybody would just want to make sure to do such an important historical day justice. But I was asked to share my story in the spirit of economic equality. So I guess that's where I'll begin. When I was a child, I attended school with a boy named Ryan. And even as a 10-year-old, I knew that Ryan had a different life than a lot of my classmates. He was the boy who often wore clothes several times too big. He often sat at the lunch table alone, and he was frequently ridiculed and taunted by other kids. It was clear that he came from a family of poverty, but it wouldn't be for many years before I fully understood the vast struggles that he faced outside of school. So there was one day when we had an assignment, it was an art project and required crayons. And like every other day, Ryan didn't have crayons because he never had school supplies. So our teacher had walked by and was reprimanding him for not coming to school prepared. And I happened to know that she kept a big supply of crayons and other things in the back of the room. So I helped myself to some crayons for Ryan, and I was promptly sent to the principal's office for my bad behavior. I was really mad. I definitely felt that it was unjust, and not that I was sitting there in trouble, but that my teacher didn't understand that Ryan just didn't have the things he needed to be in school, and it wasn't his fault. So 13 years ago, I graduated from SOU, and I took a job with the Medford School District working as a homeless advocate. And it was an honor to get to know the kids that I got to work with. These were kids who were living in some of the most unimaginable circumstances. I met children whose bed was a mattress on a dirt floor with nothing but a tarp over their head and a flashlight to read by. I met 5-year-olds who were camping in the park with mud-caked sleeping bags and mud-caked teddy bears. And I visited the tiny hotel rooms that multiple families would sleep in, where the bathroom sink was also the laundry and the kitchen sink. And I got to see the daily challenges and barriers kids have, who, while trying to go to school and do their assignments, were also worried about where their next meal was coming from, who might be sleeping next to them at night, and worrying about basic survival. quickly became aware of just how many homeless children live in our valley. 1 out of 10 to be exact. I have lived in this community my whole life and had never really seen this largely invisible population. These kids were not necessarily living under bridges or holding signs begging for money. They were living in their cars, couch surfing, camping, living in shelters, or vastly substandard housing, lacking running water, electricity, or heat. They weren't playing after school with their friends. They were trying to find food or figure out how do you get a job when you don't have an address to put on your resume. And they were trying to take care of their little brothers and sisters. It was hard to get people to believe that we lived in a community where children go hungry and cold. And as I continued to work with these kids, I started to realize that sometimes the very system of help was the greatest barrier they had. Kids were stuck trying to navigate an adult social service system, trying to figure out how to jump through all the hoops. For example, food pantries, many require you to be 18 and have ID. Well, when you're 15 and you don't have a parent, and you don't have ID, and you need ID to get ID, that's pretty confusing. In fact, it's overwhelming, and I began to see that the system is challenging under the best of circumstances, and when there's too many barriers, oftentimes kids give up and lose hope. So 13 years ago, I was a younger woman in my 20s at that time, and I didn't feel that I had the ability to make much of a difference. I could advocate and educate, but my perception was that I didn't have the power to make real change. I listened to different groups of people talk about different solutions, but I wasn't really seeing things change. Oregon, meanwhile, continued to rise as a state with the highest percentage of homeless children in the nation, and it is today. I watched how bureaucracy often got in the way of just doing what was right for people. And this to me was totally frustrating and completely unacceptable, and I started to see a better way to help these kids. I believed that every child should have the right to their basic needs, such as food and clothing and school supplies, so that they can receive a proper education. I believed in a place that treated them with dignity, compassion, and respect. I believed in a higher standard for services delivered with integrity and accountability. And I envisioned a collaborative community sharing not only their resources, but the responsibility to care for these young people in a holistic environment. And I believed in a youth-centered system shaped by the needs of our youth, one that was simple and barrier-free. Our kids deserve the chance to be all that they hope to be, and if we can help them navigate this world, they will most certainly have a better chance. As my vision became clear, I stopped waiting for other people to do something about it, and instead, I found other people who shared in my vision, and I created the Maslow Project, a nonprofit organization in Medford that provides basic needs to homeless children, teens, and families, and also helps remove the barriers to their success. I created this organization with the help of many others, literally one step at a time, building on the human capital in this valley, bringing together the people, the resources, and the services that could make a difference. This was a very daunting and at times painful process, but as history has shown over and over, real social change can be painful at times, but it's also accompanied by vision, passion, and absolute commitment to that change. It was through my work with the Maslow Project one day that I was referred a young family who was facing an immediate eviction and had 2 young boys who were needing food and clothing. When I went to their home to see how I could help, I was met at the door by their father. And that father was Ryan, the same Ryan that I had helped all those years before in school. That's when I learned that when we were growing up, he, his mother, and his sister had lived in a car the entire time we were in school. I hadn't really connected Ryan's story to the work that I'm doing today until that moment, and it brought me comfort to know that there was something more I could do to help. When I was a child, Ryan was one of a few homeless children in our schools. Today, Maslow Project, with the help of many local businesses, churches, individuals, and funders, are helping over 2,000 homeless children in the Rogue Valley. I have seen a lot of sadness and inequalities and injustice in the work that I do, and sadly, I have lost several kids along the way. But I've also had the privilege of watching many more kids grow into amazing people who are strong and resilient and will go on to make the future a better place. Kids who have been the first in their family to graduate from high school and go on to college and give back to their community. Kids who, when simply given a hand up instead of a hand out, were able to go above and beyond what they ever thought was imaginable for them. My story is about homeless youth and how a collective effort to share in the resources and the responsibilities could help make a difference. But my story also applies to all people living with economic inequality. So let's be honest, there's a lot of suffering right now. It's not just the homeless. People are hurting. They're out of work, they're losing their homes, and they're struggling to afford basic needs. I've met seniors who are working well into their 80s just to afford food and basic health care or risk going without. The cost of higher education on the other side is alarming, and many graduates are struggling to find jobs. I'm worried about the future of all of our children, but also I'm worried about today. I hope that things don't continue to get worse before we start to look for different ways of solving our problems, whether it's the economy, the environment, or human rights. There's a lot of people in our community who care. There's a lot of resources, and there's a lot of creativity. And as the old saying goes, we can't control the wind, but we can adjust our sails. So let's set our sails not just on a better tomorrow, but on a better today for everybody. Thank you.